Welcome, friends. Welcome, family. What's on, you guys? There was a DC airplane crash, mid-air crash last evening, and it's been devastating. Many people have died. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of things going on. Incoming President Donald Trump is coming to do a press conference to talk about it. There's been things, he's already had some statements out, some back and forths. Many people are angry about some of the responses, so we'll see what Donald Trump says today. I want to connect us to the press conference. They gave a 2-minute warning, so he should be coming out soon. Let's connect before they get started so we can all do this together.
It's Democratic senators from and so
Here we are.
coming together around this. We're expecting President
So reporters are in the room. They're doing their
and deliver a
setups
message to
and
the American people as the
breakdowns.
President of the United
Keep
States.
this together, you guys. What's going to be said? We saw many of this. Sorry, I'm talking over this. We saw during Donald Trump's first term, he had many press conferences about the disaster that was the COVID pandemic. Didn't take much responsibility, didn't really want to have much connection to it. We'll see if his second term starts with him at least trying to act like he cares about many folks here. Or if it's, there's a lot of blame stuff going around with this. So here he comes. Let's check it out.
I'd like to request a moment of silence for the victims and their families, please. Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal. And I have to say, the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast, mobilized immediately. The work is now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of we are in mourning. This is really shaking a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent of very talented people. Unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were born. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy Potomac, it was a cold, cold night, cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished to be with us. Together we take solace in the now.
Let's keep it real. I know he's going through the normal things that any president or leader would do whenever a tragedy like this happens. So it's to get these other things out of the way. It just seems to be struggling through it a little bit. Yes, I'm gonna be negative on this whole thing because until he proves there's some form of empathy or care for anyone else in this country, that's where we've started. That's the precedent that he's set. That's where I'm starting because that's where he started.
And then the investigation 3 years later, they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas, but we'll find out how this disaster occurred and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. The FAA and the NTSB and the U.S. military will be carrying out a systematic and comprehensive investigation. Our new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, his second day on the job when that happened. It's a rough one. We'll be working tirelessly. He's a great gentleman. The whole group these are great people, and they are working tirelessly to figure out exactly what happened. We will state certain opinions, however. I'm also immediately appointing an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected. Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made
That's an opinion stated as fact, no basis behind these
jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first.
He should cite
And
something.
they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen.
Until this
because this
guy.
was the lowest level.
He walked
Their
up and started
policy was
politics right
horrible,
now.
And their politics was even worse.
These are his politics.
So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week. It was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak. Matters intellect, talent. The word talent.
Still
They have
hasn't
to be
said what he's
talented,
done.
naturally talented geniuses.
This is just him totally
Doing
based.
that job, they won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll
That's a
have more to
promise.
say point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office. And here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities.
What's he reading from?
That is amazing. And then it says FAA say people with disabilities are most segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them. They can be air traffic controllers.
I can quote that. He just said they could
In
be air
January
traffic
14th,
controllers.
so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration. This was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. People have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target. And you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify.
These are
For
the
the
list of
position
people
of
that the president of the United States
a controller
is trying to put people against
a little
now
spot,
disabled
a little
folks.
dot on the map,
Now
a little
disabled
runway.
folks are added to the list of lesser
And
Americans.
if the initiative is, think of that, the initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan.
He expects everyone to think that everyone that works for the FAA is air traffic control. And therefore, if anyone that's not has the best vision, hearing, and all these things that he's saying he's about, which he hasn't proven that he's about, that they don't qualify. There's many positions within the FAA. They don't have to be air traffic control.
March 23rd of 22, they wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation?
He's just making that up. He doesn't even know.
He's a disaster.
He can't give you any examples.
He was
He
a
just said that.
disaster as a mayor.
He's just
He
saying.
ran his city into the ground, and he's a
Understand?
disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit.
This is just talking. And
The
he's cussing
Department of
from
Transportation
the
with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
There's no proof
So,
of this. No evidence.
I had to say
Nothing
that
cited.
it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there. And we took care of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. We took care of everybody at levels that nobody's ever seen.
This is a hate fest. This is a rally video. This is a promotional, partisan, political appearance.
And we want the people that are competent. But now we mourn and we pray, and
He's not mourning.
would like to ask all
At all.
Americans to join me in a moment of silence as we ask
We
God
already
to
did
watch
that,
over
bro.
their lives and bring comfort to the loved ones. And I just want to say God bless everyone in this room. This has been a terrible, very short period of time. We'll get to the bottom of it. So we all saw the same thing. We've seen it many times. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. Tapes are scary, very scary tapes.
Scary.
You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, he had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, "Do you see?" He was talking about, "Do you see him?" But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also he said, "Follow him in." And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place.
Do you think he was briefed on
Follow
this
him in.
to
That
give
means,
this
like, everything's
explanation?
fine. Follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold, but clear, and clear as you could be.
the president.
The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all of their landing lights on.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it from the Kennedy Center tape. We had a tape up on the Kennedy Center. That seems to be the primary. That's why I'm sure we'll see other tapes, because it's such
I don't think he
an
wants
area
to
where
take
there are
questions.
a lot of cameras looking up into the air.
I don't think he wants to take questions because there's a press full of reporters here waiting to ask him questions. I don't think he wants to answer anything.
We had a situation where you had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter
God.
very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn.
Left or right? Loop-de-loop,
and the turn
circle.
it made was not the correct turn, obviously. It did somewhat the opposite of what it was told. We don't know that would have been the difference because the timing was so tight. It was so little. There was so
really
little time
bad.
to think.
This is really
But
bad.
what you did have is you had vision. The helicopter had vision of the plane because you had vision of it all the way, perfect vision of it all the way from at Kennedy Center where the tape was taken. And for some reason, there weren't adjustments. Again, you could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You
How
could
does
have
he
gone
know?
down. You could have gone straight up,
How does he
straight
know?
down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going
Who should we ask?
and then made a
Who should we ask?
slight
For some
turn
reason. For some reason, none
at
of
the
this went
very
right.
end. And
What
it
was the
by
reason?
that time, it
Maybe
was
you
too
shouldn't
late.
say anything until you know the reason.
They shouldn't have been at the same height because if it was at the same height, you could have gone under it or over it, and nobody realized, or they didn't.
Listen, you guys, this is white supremacy. This is how leadership works when very unqualified, let's keep it real, not very intelligent people are put in place to control things that have much to do with our lives. I don't know what the reason was for this crash, but I do know he doesn't care.
A couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense. Some really bad things happened,
Bad things happen.
and some things happened that shouldn't have happened. So you
64
had a
people on
helicopter
that plane are
going
dead.
in
Maybe. What do you think shouldn't have
identical
happened?
direction. You had a helicopter that was at the exact same height as somebody going in essentially the opposite direction. You had a plane that was following a track, which
Answer
is a track
questions,
that
bro.
every other plane followed.
Answer some questions.
And I don't imagine, I know I've heard today that they might have been following the preceding plane, which was pretty close, but not that close, the preceding plane. But you wouldn't have even been able to see that because of the direction that the helicopter was coming in at. So you had a confluence of bad decisions that were made. And you have people that lost their lives, violently lost their lives. We're going to take a few questions. I'd like to ask our new Secretary of Transportation to say a few words. Sean Duffy,
Yeah, he
great
doesn't want to say
gentleman, just
anything.
started. It's not your fault, and I know you agree with me very strongly on intellect and even psychological well-being of the air traffic control. It's such an important position, and I think I can't emphasize stronger. I changed it when I first ran in 2016. I changed it. We had the highest standard that you could have, and
He's
then
just saying it.
they changed it back. That
To
was
what?
Biden.
From what to what?
a
What did you
standard
do?
I read it to you. That was from
No, you read what you
one
said.
of your papers. One of the people
You read
in this
your-
room
your
actually wrote that.
based on
And
nothing.
then I changed it back a few days ago.
And I changed it back.
And unfortunately, that was, we'll see. We don't know that necessarily it's even the controller's fault.
Yeah,
but one
you're
thing we
saying
do
so,
know, there
huh?
was a lot of vision, and
We don't know,
people
but
should
you're
have been
saying
able to
so.
see that, at what point do you stop? At what point do you say, wow, that plane's getting a little bit close?
Oh my God.
So this is a tragedy that should not have happened.
I wasn't
Please,
expecting much, and this is worse than what I was expecting.
Thank you,
worse.
Mr. President. And I would just note the president's leadership has been remarkable
You have
during
to
this
start-
crisis. We've had a whole of government response.
You have to start by praising
Local,
the guy who
state,
just showed
federal,
us that his leadership
and
is not
when you
very
see that
good.
kind of
You have to
cooperation,
promote
it
something that
begins
doesn't
with the
exist.
leadership in this body. So thank you for that,
You have
Mr.
to say
President. You
that
make
so you
our
can make
jobs a
him
lot
prop
easier.
him up to this figure that he's not.
You made an important point that when we deal with safety, we can only accept the best and the brightest
Oh,
in
God.
positions of safety that impact the lives
This is really
of
bad.
our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of the presidency,
The
the best and the
purpose here
brightest,
is to
the most
promote
intelligent
Donald Trump.
coming into these spaces. I want to take a moment and extend my condolences to the families of the loved ones. We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible, with the NTSB who is here today, as well as
Does
the
anybody
FAA.
trust them? Why
What
would you
happened
trust them?
yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday.
Captain Obvious.
That's unacceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck.
Oh,
We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation
Will the president-
and the FAA to
Does
make
he
sure
just
we
pass
have
the
the
buck?
reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President.
I want to thank you again, Mr.
and,
President. Again, I want to thank you, Mr.
appreciate
President.
the confidence you placed in me.
John
Thank you.
Duffy just said absolutely nothing except this shouldn't have happened. And best ever, Donald Trump is the greatest.
Well, thank you, Mr.
Donald
President.
Trump is awesome. This
Again,
shouldn't have
I want to
happened.
echo what the Transportation Secretary
this
said
dumbass.
about your leadership from the moment we
Back
found
to
out about
kissing
this.
Donald
we were in
Trump's
contact
ass.
with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened. I would echo it as well. No excuses. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We first and foremost from the Defense Department want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls.
That's
and
not
their
first and
families
foremost. That's
that were
third.
affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, a young captain, staff sergeant, and the CW2, chief warrant officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government
They've
mission.
said nothing so far. We've learned more from this from the Today Show and Good Morning America than these guys so far.
Last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that
Who
we've
knows?
immediately
Who knows
begun
what that is?
investigating at the DOD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top tier aviation assets inside the DOD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DOD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Black Hawks, flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government.
So what happened this time, bro? So what happened this time? What happened?
At the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir.
Thank you
And
again.
we'll stand by you on it. Thank you very much.
This is a promotion of their white supremacy. This is a promotion of their fascist government. That's all that
President, for your leadership. I just want to reemphasize something the president said, and you've heard from the Secretary of Transportation and of Defense. There really was a whole of government response. We were all on the phone. We were all communicating yesterday, trying to get to the bottom of this immediately, but also try to communicate with the American people about what happened. Something the president said that I think bears reemphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C. is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control. And we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Politics.
On DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had 2 planes at the same level.
You don't know anything, but you know that it's definitely
it shouldn't have happened.
Diversity's fault.
And we'll see. We're going to look into that. And we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharp, somebody that's psychologically superior.
These are not answers.
And that's what we're going to have.
That's what we want. We're going to have. That's what I want. Evidence.
Mentioned at the top of the briefing that there were several Russian nationals on the flight.
Yes.
Will the U.S. government implement the there is no direct air travel between the 2 countries?
And the answer is yes. Yes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. The situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is getting worse, even though President John Lorenzo has been mediating the conflict between instability. The situation is really bad right now. I want to hear from Ms. President if you have any plan in the future to bring peace in the Democratic
Republic
Republic
a question
of the
about
Congo.
Rwanda, and it is a very, I agree, but I don't think it's appropriate right now to talk about it, but it is a very serious problem.
We don't even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed, and you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane?
Those humans.
You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it comfort their families?
They
to
are
hear you
a
blaming
group of
DEI
people that have
policies?
lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question.
But are you
I'm
blaming,
surprised coming from
are
you.
you blaming air
Please.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for being here. Based on your analysis so far, do you have a sense of who is at fault? If it was the plane, the helicopter, air traffic
Do you know
control, and
anything?
that
Haven't
it is
said it.
safe to fly in and out of DC?
Well, I've given you the analysis, and the analysis was it was based on vision. You had a lot of people that
I watched the tape.
saw what was happening. You had some people that knew what was happening. There was some warnings, but the warnings were given very, very late. You know, those warnings were given very late. It was almost as they were given. A few seconds later, there was the crash. It should have been brought up earlier. But the people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I can't
Doesn't-
imagine people with 20/20 vision not
He
seeing,
doesn't know what he's talking
you know,
about.
what's
He
happening up
doesn't
there.
know what he's talking about.
Again, they shouldn't have been at the same height. You're going in reverse directions or sideways directions. Obviously, you want to be at different heights. I see it all the time when
Obviously,
I'm
you want to be
flying.
different heights.
You have planes going in
Well,
the opposite. They're
two
always
aircraft
lower.
will run into
We're
each
higher.
other.
So if somehow there's up, there's not going to be a tragedy. It'll be close, but you know, there's never going to be a tragedy if you're at a different elevation.
Oh my God.
For whatever reason, they were at the same elevation. And also, from the American Airlines Center, he's along the track that every plane is along. You say, what was a helicopter doing in that track? It's very sad. But visually, somebody should have been able to see and taken that helicopter out of play, and they should have been at a different height.
These questions have been about what happened, and he hasn't answered.
The Russians that were on board that plane, what other nationalities were on board that passengers?
There were a couple of others. We're going to be announcing it in about an hour. We have some very specific information. We're calling the countries. We've spoken to most of them, but there were some other countries represented.
Spoken to President Putin?
I have not, no.
Mr. President, on your
Not about this.
Yeah,
on your
fuck
executive order,
about
you've already
helping him.
issued an executive order that you say will restore aviation safety.
Right.
This crash happened after that. Was the executive order successful, and what more needs to change to keep people safe?
Well, you know, we issued it 3 days ago, and we're in the process of making those changes. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. Actually, my original order should have never been changed, and I think maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. Maybe. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We see like everyday life that's very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hire in the federal government? What's plan do you
I
have?
would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs.
He doesn't know what jobs were being done. He doesn't know which positions these people that he's speculating had these jobs.
Today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. We then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that
Thank you.
diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense. Okay. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
Zero facts.
We want
Just
brilliant
his
people
opinion.
doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the others is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius. Okay.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment because the U.S. ice skating community was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real. But the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's website. No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in and he changed it.
No facts.
And then when I came in 3 days ago, I signed a new order bringing it to the highest level of intelligence.
What does that mean?
Okay.
It's on the website.
No answer.
Quiet.
Welcome back to the, I'm sorry. You mentioned that a vision was probably the problem that was at issue in this crash. There's been some reports that one of the pilots in the helicopter may have been using night vision equipment. Was there any?
I heard
That's
that.
what
We don't
Pete
know.
Hegseth
We're going to
said.
know that pretty soon. It may change your view plane if you do have the night vision. So it's very possible that could have happened. That would be maybe a reason why you wouldn't actually see as well as
He's better off
on a
ending
clear
this.
night. You can see some without it.
He's better off ending this press conference.
I have a couple of more.
This is really
President,
bad.
Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly?
Go to what?
Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly as well?
For sure, we want fast confirmations, and the Democrats, as you know, are doing everything they can to delay them. They've taken too long. We're struggling to get very good people that everybody knows are going to be confirmed, but we're struggling to get them out faster. We want them out faster. It's a good question, actually. We've been
It's a good
pushing
opportunity for
Sean.
him to go
Everyone
back to
knows
politics.
Sean for a long time. He got many, many Democrat votes, but they want to take as long as they can. They ask questions like some of the questions that Peter would ask that were
He's
totally
attacking
irrelevant and
journalists
not
for
very good
asking
questions,
questions
but they
that
want to just keep it
expose how
going. They
little
want to
he
keep it
knows.
going as long as possible. I was very honored that you got so many Democrat votes. That was really good. That was really good.
When I try to meet with the families, and second question, is it your impression that military training that was done during that time?
The what?
The training that the helicopter was involved in. Is it anything you can tell us about
You
that?
don't know. These are the things that will come up with the investigation. You don't know, but the helicopter obviously was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy occurred. Please.
I've got a question about the.
No, go ahead.
Thank you,
Please.
Mr. President. You've been critical of the current regulations and you've called for big reforms at FAA. I'm curious, sir,
Well, I made the reforms, actually.
what is your message?
3 days ago, I made them.
Yes, sir. What is your message then to the American public in the weeks and months ahead? Should they feel hesitant to fly? And if you could clarify perhaps something that the Defense Secretary said when he said that this helicopter was on a continuity of government mission?
I don't know what that refers to, but
I don't know what
they
that
were
is what he wanted to say.
practicing. They do that. They call it practicing, and they were, and that's something that should be done. It's only continuity in the sense that we want to have very good people, and that has to be in continuity, and that's what they refer to. But it was basically practice, and it was a practice that worked out very, very badly. Okay.
On his question, the first question, should people be hesitant to fly right now?
Never answered it.
Not at all. I've not hesitate to fly. This is something that it's been many years that something like this has happened. And the collision is just something that we don't expect ever to happen again. We are going to have people we've already hired. Some of the people that you've already hired for that position long before we knew about this. I mean, long
So why
before,
did it work?
From the
Since you're
time I
blaming
came in,
people you
we
don't
started
know
going
about.
out and getting the best people because I said it's not appropriate what they're doing. I think it's a tremendous mistake. You know, they like to do things and they like to take them too far, and this is sometimes what ends up happening. Now, with that, I'm not blaming the controller. I'm saying there are things that you could question, like the height of the helicopter, the height of the plane being at the same level and going in opposite directions. It's not a positive. But no, we're already hiring people. No, flying is very safe. We have the safest flying anywhere in the world.
This president is incredibly ignorant. He's done.
Thank you
He's
very
already
much.
done. This guy's already done. He runs off. He comes in, makes it very partisan, then runs away like a chump, like a little. This guy runs away from questions. And when anyone asked him actual questions about what happened, he got mad at them and said, that's a dumb question, not a very smart question. Asking him, how do you know? Where's your evidence behind all these accusations? He walked out there, gave a moment of silence, and then went to ignoring anything else from all these victims. Nothing said about them. Zero care for their lives. Zero concern for how their lives, how their lives have changed. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. Everybody that stepped up there, from Sean Duffy to the vice president, they all walked up, and Pete Hegseth, they all walked up to talk bad about someone else and say, you're right, President Trump. You're right. I'm going to refer to what President Trump just said. Everything starts and ends there. All the stuff that he read originates from himself. That's the source now. There's no more evidence. There's no more professional sources. There's no real people connected to this situation. It's what he says goes. And if you don't agree with it, you're outside of the factual basis of this fascist regime. This is fascism, bro. You can not like the word and call it something else. Call it cartoon time. Either way it goes, it's a controlling group of people that are installing very unqualified folks that have the right skin tone and the right authoritarian mindset and fealty to this one piece of garbage to do everything that he tells them to do. That's who this guy is. That's what we just watched, and we're going to see a lot more of it. Zero empathy, zero accountability for what possibly is there. Everything that he said he did after Obama and then between Biden and then back and forth to him, there was zero details. If you did all this amazing thing to make sure that the FAA is staffed up correctly and you just signed this executive order 3 days ago, why the F didn't it work yet? Why were there no airplane crashes, American airplane crashes, I believe since 2009, they said. Why not? Why not? Were you president since 2009? It's embarrassing, but he doesn't even care. This is what lazy politics, this is what a lazy campaign gets you. He's a rally giver. He's a speech giver to a bunch of people who don't follow one word to the next. They just hear him go, white power, and they go crazy. That's his calling card. That's his calling card. So he has to criticize everyone else. Do you see who's on the chopping block, you guys? This guy started in 2015 criticizing Latinos, they're rapists and they're drug dealers and they're criminals. He's still on that. He's still on it. DEI stuff that the entire Republican Party adopted. That means black folks aren't qualified for anything because they're black. That's what he's saying. It's constant. Wokeism, that's allowing other folks in this country to have freedoms. They're against everything. Yo, do you guys remember when he was shot at during the campaign and they started talking about Secret Service heads and they started talking about the women that are involved when fire breaks out in Southern California? Who's the leadership? Who's the head of this organization? Who's running it? Everybody that's running it, we just saw right there talking about how it's none of their faults, how it's other folks that aren't even in office right now. The same guy that said on day one, it's going to be rainbows, lollipops and butterflies. That's what he said. And he's not delivering it because he doesn't know how to. All he knows how to do is promise, say he's done what he hasn't done, and say those things are the best things ever. That's who this guy is. He's a propagandist. He's a propagandist. And they're installing ways to make sure that he consolidates even more power from folks who finally wake up and say, yo, this guy doesn't know anything. He is about promoting himself and enriching the billionaires in his aura. That's all that there is. That's all that's happening here. It's like I was saying, they built it from Latinos to Black folks to everyone else. Now, look who the bad guys are in this press conference. Look from the very beginning who the bad guys were. Pay attention. One of the bad guys are the disabled. He said we have to have the people with the brightest intelligence, as if the folks that are hired don't have it. No evidence of that. Mental health. What evidence do you have that folks are having a mental health crisis when this happened? None. And he's criticizing the military. That was a military helicopter under this new defense secretary, Pete Hegseth. Maybe they can't see. Maybe they're hiring the wrong people. It's best that he didn't say anything and they get some investigation done, but they're not interested in the investigation because the investigation will reveal some facts. And nothing that happened in that press conference had anything to do with facts. It's embarrassing and it's deadly. 64 people died and he doesn't care, which means if another 64 people die for whatever reason that this happened, he still doesn't care because he's not looking to get to the bottom of it. He's looking to shed any responsibility from himself. That's the purpose of his entire administration. Can we go back to COVID? It's exactly what he did during COVID. This is a flashback, except it's worse because he just watched 64 people die. Do you remember what he said with COVID? First, he ignored it because he didn't want this thing to cause a panic amongst folks. He didn't see it as giving folks an awareness so they can protect themselves. He said, I didn't want to cause a panic, so he kept it a secret. Testing started happening so people could find ways to maybe avoid catching this deadly virus. And then instead of that, he wanted to hide those numbers. Let's minimize testing because if we test too much, there's going to be higher numbers of people with it. He doesn't care about what happens to people. He cares about what it looks like for him. It's horrible. It's who he is. And if you voted for it, at least say so. At least say you wanted incompetence. At least say you wanted someone who didn't care about the American people. At least say that you wanted someone who was only about promoting themselves and downplaying everything else if something on his watch makes him look bad. Yes, by the way, Kazef, you said you just tuned in. Has Trump blamed this on Biden? Yes, he blamed it on Obama. He blamed it on Biden. He blamed it on the military helicopter pilot. He blamed it on the pilots of the airplane. He blamed it on the FAA. He blamed it on little people. He blamed it on folks maybe potentially in wheelchairs. He blamed it on Black folks. He blamed it on Latinos, blanketly. And when someone asked him for evidence, he said, that's a stupid question. We don't do evidence here. We do propaganda. That's what's happening right now. Jesus. His takeaway, by the way, I listened to two airline analysts this morning on it was either Today Show, I believe it's the Today Show. Professionals who know what they're talking about. You know why? Because I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to air traffic control and the FAA and potentially why this collision happened. So I was looking for answers. And I'm not even anywhere near any kind of authority to actually find out these answers outside of watching TV and reading news reports. And this guy has all the information, potentially as much as they have, at his fingertips. And he doesn't care enough to find out. He cares enough to come out and talk about what he did, which he didn't do, and then talk about what other folks did, which they didn't do. Only for the sake of downplaying diversity, equity, and inclusion in the country. To downplay anyone that says, yo, this happened under your watch. He's a horrible person. He's a horrible person, and he risks your life. And when two reporters asked him, should Americans be concerned about flying? You just said the FAA is incompetent under your administration. The FAA is incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. I fired all these people and I'm going to bring in more folks. And it's still not his fault. I thought things happened immediately in Donald Trump's world. That's what he kept telling people on the campaign trail. But now it's been 3 days and it's just not enough time yet. He didn't even say that much. That's just supposed to be insinuated. I would advise people to, read up more, potentially look into maybe where some of the most dangerous flight paths are before you take flights. We have to start looking out for ourselves, because this guy's going to continue, not going to start, going to continue to hide information. The less information that he believes the public has, the better off he is, because he doesn't have to answer for anything. So there's going to be a suppression of more information, more news, and more promotion of him being the supreme leader who knows everything. Thanks, you guys. I'm going to do this story in a minute. All this stuff is coming up on Watchlist today. If you guys are going to be checking in with things that are going on, we're going to talk about this more detail. I'm going to break down some of those ridiculous questions and answers that he decided to give, and accusations he tossed out there. Also, earlier in this chat, you guys, someone asked about that. There was a pastor or a priest who threw up Elon Musk's and Adolf Hitler's Heil Hitler sign because it's fun. And now he's complaining that there's consequences for it because they all laughed about it. So think about that in their quest for, the sanctity of life. I'm tired of these guys already, and it's only noon Eastern. Thanks, you guys. Check out the videos today. I'm gonna try not to yell or curse, but they should still be on point, you guys. I'll talk to you guys soon. I'm glad you guys showed up. It's outrageous. Talk to you guys later.